Today I'd like to take us back to the beginning. Always a good place to start. Just God, give us grace as we study from your word. Give us insight into who you are and how you deal with us. Amen. I was thinking about the beginning of life, and you go back to the creation story written in Genesis, and it says, in the beginning. But what I find interesting is that from our scientific mind, our 20th century education, where we want to line up history, we want to understand facts, just give me the facts, I'll sort it out. Here, I believe that God was doing a couple of things that you may not have looked at before, so I'd just like to share some of my thoughts with you on that. In the beginning, it says in Genesis, let's have a look it up, first book of the Bible, very first part of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, in verse 2, it says, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. In the beginning, God created. There's a lot of thought about, did he create the stars at that time, etc. But what's interesting is that the earth was null and void. In other words, it was there. It could have been there for millennia. Who knows how long the earth was sitting here, null and void. But this was his latest creation, I believe. And Jesus came down and established the earth with his words and spoke into being the creation story. Now, when Moses recorded this, he simply wanted to record this for the Israelites to know what their heritage was. He wanted to tell them, explain to them where they came from and where they were going. And I think that's still appropriate for us today. If we know where we come from, we can certainly know what we're about and where we're going. So I want to introduce to you the idea of three things today. I want to cover the fact that there was chaos, there was rest, and then there was purpose. There was chaos, then there was rest, and then there was purpose. First off, the chaos. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Interesting that the Spirit of God was here. It was always here on this planet. And God is now starting us on this journey, but I'd like to suggest to you that he'd more than just create the planet and everything that we know, nature, human beings, all of that, and there's plenty of debate about how and why and where. I would like to suggest to you, though, that he actually created time. He actually created time. Now, notice with me, as we go through this, that whilst the earth was chaotic and there was no form to it, there was also no form to time. So what's the first thing that he did? In verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and was morning the first day. The first day. Interesting how he ends each one of these with the first day, the second day, the third day. He's actually creating time slots for us to actually, do something with. It ends up in the seventh day, and what he did on that day was that he rested. And then out of that came purpose. So I just want to let you think about this idea that God didn't just create the planet, but he created time for us. He actually created the daily cycle. Now, we know what that daily cycle looks like. The sun comes up today, it comes up again tomorrow, it comes up again the next day, has done for an awfully long time. Whether he created the sun, I don't think that he did at that point in time. It was a literary thing, if you have a look into it, how Moses describes this. But what he did do was he cleared the atmosphere. He actually took away the fog. He took away the atmosphere, cleared it up so the sun could actually shine through to the earth. And now, if you're on the earth, you would actually see the light, and you would actually see the stars as well. I think that's what the physical attributions were. But the bigger issue here is not so much the physical, is the time. Time we still have trouble trying to understand, the nature of it, the substance of it. But in God's time, he created for us. He actually separated the night from the day and gave us a cycle to actually work with. Interesting enough, every time period in creation is linked to some sort of physical event. The months are driven by the moon rotating around the earth. The sun designates our year. There's nothing that actually designates the 7 days except for the biblical story of creation. There's nothing in nature that gives us a 7-day cycle. However, we seem to function very well on a 7-day cycle. Somehow, the God of the universe knew that we needed order when it came to time, and that we'd actually work on a cyclical basis. And so he created the first day. Notice with me in verse 8, God called the vault, which was above the earth, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God saw that this was good, coming down to verse 13, and that was the third day. Why was he doing these creation pieces and then calling it, okay, there's day 1, there's day 2, there's day 3? Now, in our thinking, in Western world, we in our education system, we look at things from a scientific basis, which is all good, nothing wrong with that. However, it biases the way that we actually construct our thinking. Now, when we read the first and second and third day, we think, okay, number 1, he did this, number 2, he did that, number 3, he did that. Rather than that, what if we looked at it and said, hey, you know what? He's actually just counting the numbers up. He's actually defining the days, not just what he did on those days, but he's actually defining the days and saying, hey, there's number 1. Guess what? Number 2's coming. Number 3. What's coming at the end of all this is day 7. That's what's interesting. So out of the chaos of no time, because if you were sitting down on the planet and the earth was null and void and you couldn't see the sun or the stars, you had no idea what time it was. You put yourself down a dark cave, you've got no idea what time the time is unless you actually have a watch to give you that idea. So there was no essence of time. And so here I think that God is creating the time parameter for us. And as you go on, you'll see that he did the miraculous. And interesting enough, the first parts of this, Jesus, when he was creating, he also called the things something. He said, okay, that's the land, that's the sea. He said, here's the vegetation. He reserved some things for Adam and Eve to do, though. He didn't complete all of that. So that was the interesting point. We can come back to that. But what I want to introduce to you is just the fact that Jesus did several things. Number 1, he made order out of the chaos of time, and he named things through his words. So he actually called them things so that we had a name for them. He started that process. Later on, you'll see that Adam and Eve were called to name the animals. And so Adam and Eve had a purpose and a function. They had to actually start furthering that process. God started it, and Adam and Eve were to continue that process. So out of the chaos of nothingness, time and the earth was created. Interesting enough, if we come down now to the day that God created man, verse 27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Notice he uses the word mankind in his own image. There's a duality. The male and the female is what God created. There's a duality to the image of God, and there's a duality to what he creates. Verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. All of a sudden, once God has actually created man, he gives him a job to do. He says, you need to go and subdue the earth. You need to actually tame it. You need to figure out how to make order out of it. I started the process for you, but it's your job to continue it. Out of this comes purpose. He also says, go forth and multiply. He says, go and have kids, for goodness sake. They're great. They're the procreation process that he put within us. And that there's such a delight and joy that it creates memories and life and love. When a child is born into the earth, there's new love that gets created, because now there's the love for the father to the child, from the mother to the child, from the child to the parents to the other siblings, from the uncles, the aunts, the love that actually comes down to that child and gets returned, from the grandparents to the child. There's actually love that gets created whenever a child comes into the world. And that's a magic process all on itself. But I want to just come back to, out of the chaos came rest. We need to go over to chapter 2, and just the first verse of chapter 2 in Genesis. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. Verse 2, by the seventh day God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. He makes a fairly big deal here now of the seventh day. He actually rests on the seventh day. He gave us a great little formula to follow, if you like. At every 7 days we are to take a break and just rest from the toil and labour of the struggle on this planet. And it was designed back in creation when things were perfect. We still need to rest on the Sabbath day back in the creation story. Even more so now with the stresses of life and the sin problem that actually has messed up the planet and made it difficult to make a living. It's made it difficult to have children and to raise them. It's made it difficult to actually work and to get money in and pay the bills. All of those things have been brought about by sin. But here we see in this creation story that God rested. He just stopped. You know, in these past few weeks I've shared with you how Jesus sleeps. He still does incredible things while he sleeps, but he just rests. For goodness sake, he rested in the boat when the storm was raging. Here in creation, you see him resting again. He's created something out of chaos, and he rests. And out of that, what's interesting is it comes to the purpose that mankind was actually for. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 1, to that verse 28. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves upon the ground." We're actually to take care of the animals, the birds of the sky, the fish in the sea, and the animals that roam the earth. In that, we actually find purpose. There's things for us to do. We're not just here for ourselves. We're here to take care of others. We're here to take care of children and children's children. We're here to take care of all the processes of life. Now, added into that was the sin problem, and that created an awful lot of chaos for that. And out of that, we see the sustainability problems that we have on the earth. We see the population growth that we all are somewhat concerned about. We also see pandemics, which just slap us in the face, wake us up and say, hey, what's going on this planet? Interesting enough, Jesus, every 7 days, when he was on this earth, he stopped and he rested. He set an example for us that we need to take a day out. We need to just stop. Turn everything off. Just slow down. I'm resting today. I pray that today you'll actually get that out of the chaos of your life. That God will create time for you to rest and enjoy his company, and also to enjoy your family and your friends. If you've never given your control of your life over to God in this process of understanding where you came from, what you're for, and you'd like some of that purpose in your life, and you've never done that before, I just ask that you'd pray this simple prayer. God, we want to thank you for giving us life. You gave us purpose too. And I've tried most of my life just to do it myself. I want to give you, God, the chance to do that for me. Take care of my salvation, walk me into the kingdom that you've promised. And it's just going to be glorious and fabulous. And be with me every day from now till then. I give you my life. I give you my will. I give you my control. Amen. If you prayed that for the first time, I pray that you'd find a church that you can go and fellowship with. Find some Christians that you can find meaning with, some commonality, and just find a way to understand better who God is and what purpose he's got for you for life. If you've been here for a long time, if you've been a Christian for a long time, I pray that you'll be encouraged by just knowing that there's a God of the universe that cares about you and your time, and he wants to create something out of the chaos that happens around you. And he wants to give you a purpose in that endeavour. Till next time.